Several of the Trump administration's top officials attended the Road to Majority conference hosted by the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Does that sound like a word salad? That's what far-right Christian nationalists do best. And today we are going to talk to the OG Tradwife and the author of my favorite book from last year about all of this. I am Maggie Gelson Burnett.
And I'm Mallory Hagan. This is Pretty Furious.
Shit about organized religion.
We're going to talk about organized religion. That's what's going to happen.
We're going to talk some shit. I'm so excited. I could not be more excited for our guest that we have joining us today. She's so cool. She's so cool. I can't get over how cool she is.
She's cool and she's layered.
And really wicked smart.
Yeah. It's going to be a great conversation. I know you all are going to really enjoy hearing what Tia Levings has to say. If you haven't picked up her book yet, you definitely should. It's called A Well-Trained Wife. And you need to pick it up anyway because she's got another book coming out next year, and you will need to read this one in order to understand that one. Especially if you're a person who has been indoctrinated.
With any kind of religious trauma, this is for you.
If you have had to unpack a whole lot of things you learned, whether directly or indirectly. Reading her book, I realized I didn't grow up going to church on a regular basis. I went with my grandparents, but my parents and I did not attend regular Sunday service. And I did go as a teenager. But all that to say, the religion was not something that was present in my household on a daily basis. And so much of what I was reading in her book, I was like, oh yeah, totally. Just growing up in Alabama, growing up in the South. So even if you're not a person who identifies truly as someone who's religious, I still think that there are so many things you begin to understand and unpack just by reading her book. Because you're like, oh yeah, I always thought that too. Because of society and how all of this shapes the way that we interact with the world. Crazy.
Start to realize too how much the United States specifically puts into bringing religion into places where religion should not be. Why are we bringing in prayers to schools, public schools? This is it's bonkers. So it's gonna be great. But
it's gonna be a good conversation.
If you haven't yet, please be sure to follow, share, subscribe, all of the things. We are on every single platform at Pretty Furious Pod. We are also on Substack. That is our new hosting platform for this podcast, so you can find us there. It is prettyfuriouspod.substack.com. And that's the gist there.
Yeah, we still have our giveaway happening. Until we reach 1,000 followers, nobody's getting that box of goods, and Maggie wants it out of her house.
Guys, it has been in my fucking office for 6 months now. Not 6 months, but a while. Too long. So go enter our giveaway. Share it with your friends. You could win a box of $500 worth of beauty products. But Mallory, we can't be pretty furious without being pretty first. What product are you loving this week besides Head and Shoulders?
Yeah, man.
Head and Shoulders needs to purchase airtime for another advertisement. So
God. So but I'll tell everyone. I just got back from the beach and I put on some mineral sunscreen at the beach, which is, by the way, what happened last time. I was wearing sunscreen on a Saturday for our kids' sports. And I'm realizing that I think what's causing the issue with my skin is wearing any type of mineral sunscreen. So Head & Shoulders saved the day again. My product this week is the Morphe Lip Liner in Backseat Love.
Cute.
Instead of front seat love, we're in the back seat. Love this lip liner. Love this product. It is what I'm wearing right now. It's the perfect nude, at least for me. What did they say? You're supposed to match your nipple?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would just like everyone to know I'm pregnant right now, so that's not the color of my nipple. TMI, but it was until I started having symptoms of pregnancy. Anyway, this is the perfect color for me, and I just love Morphe products, especially lip products, so that's my product this week. What about you?
I once had a guy in like, I don't know if this was grade school or high school, who told me that the color of your lip is the same color as your nipple. And I actually don't know if that's true or not, but I actually
No, no,
might
no.
suspect that it could be.
It's not the same color. That's the perfect color match. So when you go to do the perfect nude on your lip, you're supposed to match your nipple color.
No, I know, but this guy told me
So
that
what we should be doing, we should be whipping our nipples out in Ulta. Hey guys, can you find me?
Can you color match this?
Yeah. What do they have the tool in Sephora that like reads your forehead?
You just scan your nipple.
Yeah, could you just do my
Perfect.
nipple instead? Thank you.
I'm dead. So my product this week is it's a drugstore product. It's the L'Oreal Lumi. This is like their liquid blush. Le Liquid Blush is what it's called. It comes in this little tube. Let me just tell you guys. So the L'Oreal Lumi line is basically one of my favorite product lines from the drugstore. It is excellent quality, first of all, but let me show you this applicator.
I can't even think that I've heard of it.
So
Is it giving Rare Beauty dupe or better?
This is exquisite. I mean, like, I don't know that I'd go as far as Rare Beauty because it's not as liquidy and it's not as pigmented, but it's gorgeous. I mean, it's what I'm wearing on my face today. This is the shade.
I was thinking that your makeup looks really beautiful today.
Thank you so much. This is the
You are
shade
so welcome.
Dewy Bright Pink. The L'Oreal Lumi line, they are best known for their Lumi Glotion is what it's called. And it's like the stuff you can just throw on your skin. It's sort of like a tinted moisturizer, if you will. And they just released this blush and it's exquisite. So there you have it.
Love that. I'm going to try that. I've never even heard of that line altogether.
Yeah. I think they just started releasing like some new products in that line, but yeah, it's quite good.
All right. Well, there's a lot going on. We're going to talk about Christian nationalism. We're going to talk about fundamentalism. We've got a whole lot coming down the pipeline with Tia. But first, what headline has made you pretty furious this week?
My headline is from the New York Times. It's an opinion article from Jessica Gross, and it says, "The Unrepentant Return of Christian Diet Culture." And it has sort of this like picture of a woman stepping on a scale, and it says angel, lamb, sinner, and so on and so forth. And it kind of like shows along the weight little notches that are on a scale. And basically it talks about how, Christianity is now sort of bringing back in this diet culture facet, which we actually end up talking with Tia a little bit about in this episode. So I thought this was a great kind of pairing. But basically, they also talk about how Alex Clark, who spoke at the Young Women's Leadership Summit, which was Turning Point USA's big, circle jerk of Christian white women in a room together. She talks a lot about that and how Alex Clark started one of her little speeches at this summit by saying, "Less Prozac, more protein." And it's like,
oh, Jesus.
it's like, girl. So yeah, anyway, that is my headline. And I just, hate everything about diet culture and what that has become. So
yeah, the conversation with Tia is kind of interesting regarding that, right? Like,
yeah,
just
absolutely.
how that ties into.
I didn't really even like consider that a whole lot. That for me was not one of the sort of top points of her book. But now that I'm kind of like rethinking her book and everything she mentioned today, I'm like, that's actually wild because it has so much to do with taking up space, how you feel comfortable presenting in a room full of, men, how you feel about your body, the trauma that's happened to your body, so on and so forth. So yeah, I actually didn't really think about how much that ties in.
Speaking of trauma that happens to people's bodies, my headline is actually that we're recording today, which is Wednesday, July 2nd. So I'm not sure what will happen between now and Monday when this comes out. But as of today, Sean Diddy Combs has been acquitted of both trafficking and racketeering. And I just am so flabbergasted how any jury looked at any piece of this puzzle and thought not guilty on that front. But that has made me pretty furious. I think for anyone who's experienced coercion, sexual trauma, any type of situation where consent wasn't present, not to mention all of the testimony around him and the activities that transpired over the course of the last 20 plus years of his fame and fortune. Anyway, that has made me so mad. And I really hate it for the people who were his victims and the victims of those situations all the way around. I'm glad that he was found guilty on the other charges, but for some reason, just knowing that the racketeering and trafficking is what he got away with is really bothersome to me.
Yeah, it's like those are kind of the major charges anyway, so it's frustrating, yeah, that he...
One of his attorneys had the audacity to say domestic violence is not, what did he say? Domestic violence isn't a federal crime or something, which like it's not, but it was just the presentation of the nature of like, so what? So he's on camera beating up this woman, who cares? I don't know. There's just a lot about it. But anyway, that has made me pretty furious, and I think even though it is front and center for some folks, it's probably being buried this week by the big, quote unquote, beautiful bill and some other things. So, who has experienced some intense trauma is our guest today, author Tia Levings. Tia is a former Tradwife and a Christian fundamentalist, and together with her children, she narrowly escaped the Christian patriarchy. Now she's dedicated to shining a spotlight on the realities of high control religion and church-sanctioned domestic abuse, and she helps fellow survivors. So we are really excited to have her on today to talk about her book and everything that has transpired in her life since then. Let's welcome Tia Levings.
Tia, welcome in. We are so excited to have you, and you have brought a headline that makes you pretty furious. So can you share that with us?
We are recording this at such a time. This is a little serendipitous, I suppose, when you need a headline that's going to make you pretty and furious. Like, yesterday was crazy making. Trump toured alligator Alcatraz a day before its first arrivals are expected. This is NPR's headline, and I don't call it Alcatraz because that implies that these people have been tried for a crime and committed to a prison. This is not what this is for. This is for detainees that are presumed innocent until proven guilty, and processed through due process that everyone's supposed to get on American soil. And 83% of detainees have no record by ICE's own data. So fuck all of that to the end. The Everglades is our like continental lungs. It's not supposed to be inhabited. It's natural territory. Boy, you got me riled so fast, but like no one is supposed to live there. They did not get permits. They built this in 8 days. There's not going to be any hurricane forecasting. It is flooding today before people even get there. Yeah. It's ridden with mosquitoes and alligators and pythons, giant pythons. No one is supposed to be there, and they know people are going to die, and they think it's funny. So the fact that they think it's funny touches on everything I'm from with their death cult and their love of hell and their lust for people to suffer. And so, yeah, it makes me all very furious. And my fire is how I do my work. So there we have it.
We, in my day job, I work for the Seneca Project, and we are a women-led political action committee. And we have been having, these fire conversations about what we're calling it's a concentration camp. I mean,
exactly.
It's not for people who as you mentioned, have gone through the due process. And even if they had, going through due process is not an excuse for someone to live in inhumane conditions.
Exactly.
And we often refer to this administration as a death cult. So, speaking of cults,
yes.
Great segue
for people who don't know who I am.
Well, we have read your bio, and we are really excited to have this, what we hope will be enlightening and in-depth conversation about the challenges that come with Christian fundamentalism here in the United States and how that has translated to where we are today. So you talk a lot and in detail about your escape from Christian fundamentalism, and with everything that's happening here in the United States, can you talk a little bit about why you think that we have swung so far right? Or is this just something that people hid really well in Christian fundamentalist communities up until now?
We're here by design, by strategic design and a 50-year plan to get here. Empowered by the internet, empowered by cult traits and personality, charisma, momentum, power, all of that. They don't hide their plan. They've been preaching this openly every Sunday in the evangelical churches for decades, and it was always to start with the model of the family and scale it up. It was always to get into our highest level of government and change laws. They were preaching about overturning Roe and systematically changing our country back to pre-civil rights era. They want to go back to segregation, back to enslavement, back to before women's suffrage, and they have not hidden any of this. So the difference is that it hit critical mass. The internet helped empower it. Donald Trump took it to heights that I don't think anybody really saw coming, but they were very happy to tag on to whatever would get them through the door. And there's factions in this theocratic movement. You know, definitely there will be infighting because, like, for example, Opus Dei Catholics do not really believe that evangelicals are real Christians and vice versa, but they both have a seat at the table right now. And Donald Trump is supposed to offend every sensibility a Christian has, but that doesn't seem to be playing out. So that's what
exactly.
You said that, but so this is the thing I always can't wrap my head around. Like, I can wrap my head around the fact that they want to take us back. They want us to go to pre-civil rights era. They want women back in the kitchen. All of these things, but I can't understand to what end. This is a conversation my friends and I have a lot. Who does that serve? Just a couple of really rich, high-profile people? Like, I can't get to the root of why. Why do women need to be set back? Why do we need to lack education, be barefoot in a kitchen? What purpose does that serve?
The purpose is, the purpose for all of this is dominionism. And so if you are dealing with sincere believers, they do believe in a theocracy, in a theology that teaches that they will have dominion. They are given dominion by God at the creation mandate to take over the country, to take over the world, to have dominion over all creation. Very sincere believers still cling to that. The ones that are there for the power grab or for the society, they just want white men in charge. At its heart, at its core, it's a white supremacist organization. It's a misogynistic corporation. It is. They want white, very few people in charge, and they will be old white men because that's what patriarchy is. They do believe that that's how society runs best. And they have all these problems they have to solve that were created by letting the women out and letting brown people out and letting freedom reign and democracy. They're not pro-democracy, so they don't like that. They want a top-down power structure. And so to what end is that it's control. You can't control democratic masses. You can't control everyone having equal rights and freedoms. And they need control in order to make their system thrive. So what do they need to do and to bring us back into control? Well, they have to put the women back at home. They have to get people, they have to have a different population makeup. They need to get rid of some people. They're okay with lots of people dying because it's going to clean things up and tidy stuff for them. Deporting people makes us whiter as a country. That's cleaner for them. So yeah, it's all like, what does it manifest in? Whatever they're doing, what's it going to lead to? As horrible as it sounds for us to accept that that's what they're doing, that is what their behavior is pointing to. So I'm a believer in take them at their behavior and what are they producing, and then accept that. Don't try to buck against it. Donald Trump's famous for saying he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and nobody would leave him. I do believe, yesterday I heard this awful conspiracy theory about cargo planes where they were pushing people out of the planes. There's no evidence that supports that in this hemisphere. It's definitely happening in Spain, but not here. And it won't matter. If literal bodies are falling from the sky, it won't matter to people who are in the cult. And that is the end. They need controlled masses, and they have achieved that.
Oh my gosh, so many things coming to my brain. But have you guys ever seen that meme of Charlie from It's Always Sunny where he's like pointing to the whiteboard and it's like all the stuff written behind him on the whiteboard? That's like how my brain operates when I hear about Christian fundamentalism and how it intersects with all of these different avenues like eugenics and patriarchy. All of these things kind of come together into one big sort of map. And I think that was one of the major takeaways for me reading your book, was that I was putting all of these pieces together. Now, Mallory and I both come from, religious backgrounds. We grew up in our respective churches. I grew up Catholic, very immersed in the Catholic Church for really my entire formative years. How do you think religious trauma is impacting our nation's young women specifically? We just talked last week about the Turning Point USA Women's Conference. So how do you think that that is impacting like young women and kind of this premise of, well, we have to get them back at home, we have to take away literature and education from them? How do you think that all kind of has a greater impact?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a heartbreaking one. These young women are coming up at such a chaotic time, and fundamentalism thrives in chaos. And so they create the chaos, and then they offer the solution for the chaos, and it's a trap. We have right now, this generation of women is the most advanced of all human civilization. They have the access to the most information, the most history and research, the most avenues and technology and opportunity. And so if we're asking them to go back 200 years, how is that going to happen? You have to form their minds. Their minds are not even fully developed yet. Bless their baby hearts. Like they're at their most fertile, and the patriarchy wants them. And the patriarchy is pushing hard to make everybody breed at, the youngest ages and have as many people as possible, which is nothing new. And we know how that goes. But they're going to try to convince these young women to choose it for themselves. And so all of that confusion, I just have so much empathy for them, because they should be launching into fully developed lives that then go pursue their dreams. And they have all of this opportunity to do so. And they're going to close the door on themselves because they have been convinced that this is better, to the argument of all evidence of the contrary. It's tragic.
What's really interesting about the concept of this sort of Tradwife movement and the display of motherhood and being a traditional wife that we're seeing online, which has been talked about a lot, is this idea that these women aren't working, but they're working online. But what I think is telling is the conversation I had in preparation for this recording of this podcast was with my husband. And he was like, well, I just don't understand what's wrong with sharing that being a mom and being a wife is good. And it was a really very like surface innocent remark on his part, right? He was like, well, what's wrong with that? And I was like, there is nothing wrong with presenting that as something to desire. I was like, what's wrong is that we're presenting it in tandem with, you don't need to work. You don't need your own stream of income, without telling the rest of the story, without telling these young women what that could potentially lead to. Or if you're going to make that choice, how you protect yourself 10, 15, 20 years down the road if you do choose to not work and stay home. How do you protect yourself in your marriage such that if something happens, you still have an opportunity or the ability to leave? And so I think that so much of your story is like this idea of, how do you leave? Like, how do you get out? What tools and resources do you have? So I just found that to be so, when my husband said that, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
It is. It bless his heart. He's saying something so valid. It is beautiful to stay home with your children. It is beautiful to mother. All of that is true. I loved those years with my kids. You'll never hear me say that it's a bad choice. No, of course, it should be everyone's individual choice. It should not back you into a corner where you're stuck there. And it should not be entirely dependent on the benevolency of your patriarch. You don't want to be at someone's mercy. Things change, he might be great today, not so great tomorrow. Something innocent might happen, he might get taken out. Like, if you can't change your mind tomorrow without blowing up your life and changing, like impacting your family relationships and your status with your savior and everything else, then you've chosen against your own agency. Choice is supposed to give you more choice, not lock you in.
Lock you in, yeah, exactly. So you're somebody who has lived inside of these fundamentalist circles. You have witnessed how these extreme beliefs can end up shaping families and communities. And I'm curious what connections you see between sort of the rise of Christian nationalism and the threats to women's rights and democracy on that point of like women choosing to stay home. And now we live in a world where somehow, again, we're talking about women maybe not having access to their own bank accounts again. These are real conversations that are scaring the shit out of women, scaring some women. How do you see those connections forming in today's world? And maybe like, what are the warning signs? Obviously we're very immersed in the warning signs,
Right.
but like outside of the Christian fundamentalist community, you know, I was just telling Mallory before we started recording, I said, you know, I grew up in a community where really small town in rural Eastern Iowa, where half the community was Lutheran and half the community was Catholic. I didn't even know that, you know, my idea of what other religions existed was very limited. And I just, to me, it feels like these are like hidden little circles of churches, you know, across the country. And it's like, Mallory was like, but they're not. They're
Yeah.
like completely out there in the open. And I'm like, I know, that's what blows my mind. So I'm curious how, you know, like from your perspective, being so immersed in those communities, what you see in relationship to women's rights and this Christian nationalist movement.
Yeah, it's all a means to an end. So in Christian nationalism, which started out as Christian patriotism, you wanted to be a patriot, you wanted to be love your country. Everything that goes wrong is the woman's fault. So that's really something to watch for. Like in the 90s, we were hearing entire Sunday sermons on evil Murphy Brown. And Murphy Brown is a fictitious TV character, but everything that goes wrong in society is always traced back to women. Or Eve, you know, if you got to get really historic with it, you go back to the first woman and then you blame it on her. So if you want to correct society's ills, you're going to start with the women. You're going to get them to be quiet. You're going to get them to make more babies, specifically white babies. They'll take care of the black population later. They want us in a box, and they know they're smart enough to be patient and to do that very systemically and quietly. And it's going to be two-pronged. They're going to go after a legislative approach, and they're going to go after the soft approach, the soft sell, which TikTok has helped so much with this, because it's that influencer marketing to get girls to choose this for themselves. So yes, they're taking away our rights, but they're also normalizing not having rights. Tradwife influencers will get you to consider that maybe it makes sense to have your husband in charge of everything. And maybe he's just good at that. And maybe he's really lonely if you don't give it to him. If he doesn't get to feel like Mr. Man, then he's not, God, it doesn't have a place in society anymore. And we need to prop him up. And so they will just lure you into like, oh, well, yeah, that's more reasonable. I can see why this would work.
Or it's easier. It's easier if I just let him do all the hard stuff. The
Exactly.
finances.
Oh my God, that conference, their slogan was more babies, less burnout. And I was like, said someone who hasn't had a lot of babies.
Yeah, I was like, do you know how these two things like impact one another? Like the cognitive dissonance is
Oh my God,
pretty
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But these young women can still vote. And that's critical because they need them to vote against themselves. We just spent all this week arguing about Medicare, and they are voting against themselves. And that is the success of the Mind movement.
It's crazy. There are I made a video just about the impacts of Medicare or Medicaid, SNAP, all of those things, how the people just in Alabama will be impacted. How many people will this cause harm to? And the amount of white women in my comments saying, well, you have a job, you'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, but you're also advocating for women to not work. So, right. I mean, we're like, I don't know. I think one of the things that really stood out to me over the course of reading your book, and it made me evaluate my own life and growing up in Southern Baptist churches and churches on the square, is this over and over again, we as young women, and specifically around religion, are encouraged to abandon our intuition. There were many times throughout the book that you had a thought, or you expressed that you thought one thing and you abandoned that to go forward with whatever the religious teaching was or whatever the societal teaching was. How have you regained the ability to listen to your gut and intuition over the last, you're not even 20 years out, right? So
right, yeah, I left in 2007.
It's a short period of time.
That's wild. I
Short
hadn't thought of
period
it
of
that
time
way.
in the grand scheme of things, yeah.
Mostly because I feel like I'm still living so much of it, and recovery is ongoing. So there are new layers all the time. For example, you guys are going to ask for a beauty product later, and I had to have a deconstruction moment about that. So we'll get to that. But yes, it hasn't been that long that I've been out, and it is very active. I think one of the big turning points was my actual escape, because my escape was so intuitive and instinctive and trauma informed. Like I was told to run in my head. I still don't know. It sounded like an audible voice to me. listening to it to that kind of like waiting until the very last minute where it's life and death matter, and then honoring what's happening in my body and grabbing them and going, and then having the immediate validation that he was about to kill us, that is really strong in my body. And when I go against my intuition, that is also very strong in my body. So what actually happens is that I have intuitive moments where I can't always articulate why I feel the way I do, but I need to honor it because it's going to be too expensive on my system if I don't. And most of the time it will play out and I'll go, oh yeah, I see now. Or I'll get the language, or, therapy will help me identify it, that kind of thing. The intuition is super dangerous to patriarchy. They can't handle it, which is why Allie Beth Stuckey is on this toxic empathy train. She is battling that as hard as she can because she's the patriarchy's water carrier to convince other women to not give in to their intuition and to not be weak. You need to be strong because it's that empathy that we feel that is so closely tied to our intuition that would make us make changes, put our foot down, stop what's happening. Women can stop the patriarchy anytime we want. Patriarchy can't continue without women. So they really have to help us police ourselves, and that involves choosing against ourselves, which starts with intuition. We have to doubt ourselves, question ourselves, argue and rationalize ourselves away from the harm and danger that we're seeing. And my story opens with the scene of my children on purpose, very much on purpose, because it was empathy for my kids and realizing what I was doing for the next generation that finally got me to sit up. Like I had been in this like suffering is my way, suffering is the Lord's way, suffering is what I'm here for kind of mindset for so long. It was going to kill us, and it was only having empathy for my children that helped me wake up. So that's the power of intuition in my body, and I have to listen to it.
You brought up therapy, and
lots of it.
Therapy is something that's also really railed against in the church.
Yes.
Because then you're not placing your trust in God, you're not taking your troubles to God, etc. How did you overcome that mind hurdle of starting the process of going to therapy, and how have you also helped your children through that?
Great question. So in my book, there's a story of where I tried to go to therapy in the middle of some of the worst violence, and I had therapeutic abuse from a Christian counselor. So by the time I left, I knew where I was not going to go, and I was clear enough to say, I don't want my therapist or my counselor to be more supportive of the system than my health. So I'm a big believer in licensed therapy that has transparency, and the therapist themselves has accountability to a board. I think that's very important structure for therapy. How I got to where it was I decided I needed to be better. I wanted my life to be better. Therapists are brain doctors, mind doctors, so I wanted to fix what was in my mind. I wanted to heal my wounds, overcome, and not fall for the same thing over and over and over again. Therapy's challenging and hard because what you're really doing in therapy is not so much not trusting God. It's that you're talking to a mandatory reporter. You're talking to people who can see into what's happening. That's why they don't want you to go to therapy. So knowing that and being willing to, at that point, tell on them was helpful.
Yeah. Did you do EMDR therapy? Or am I making that up?
Super transformative. Yeah.
Yeah. I did EMDR therapy as well for a while, longer than one should do EMDR therapy. And I always tell people, I'm like, everybody will have their different experiences in therapy, but EMDR was life-changing and probably life-saving for me in so many ways. And my oldest sister now is now a therapist. And so we talk a lot about how therapy is, being backed by sort of a higher institution and having, these boards that license people, all of the kind of groundwork and sort of these like pseudo therapists who exist out in the world, or coaches. Who exist now. Yeah, exactly. So I just find that fascinating that, you mentioned that is a crucial piece of it, which I love. Now, something else that struck me in your book is the piece about literature and how kind of like literature and learning more education, truly, like at its core, for you, was almost like, I sort of took it as almost a key component of how you ended up putting all of these pieces together and leaving. Yeah. And so I'm curious how you view like the dismantling of education, book bans, you know, the commingling of church and school, how we're praying in classrooms, like, you know, how this all kind of contributes to where our country is headed in terms of Christian nationalism.
It makes me pretty furious, I can tell you. Like, I have a massive education wound. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to learn. I am driven by books. I love books. They help save my life. Conversations about books help open my mind. And I love that we get to live now with so much information and so much access. And I think it's worth protecting because that is how we learn to think critically, how we broaden our worldviews, how we resist controlling regimes. And they always go for the education first. They always pull you out of the system and then they try to change the system. And Christian patriarchy, again, hasn't been secret about what they want to do with education. They have removed all their white children from public schools and they have created these charter and private schools so that they can put all the other and create this class system through education. And then they attack education itself. And the next thing we're going to hear is that we don't need higher ed. We just need the Delta class. We need the working class, you know, and they're going to get us even more further apart. I was just watching today, like how the truest innovation, the biggest innovation for America was the development of the middle class and how that really changed things after World War II. And that so many of our problems could be solved if we went back to the tax code that we had during the 50s and 80s. And it's thought-provoking because Christian patriarchy is trying to divide us into a very tiny billionaire class and then a very large working class with no middle class. And education is how they do it. That's how they get there. That's the means to the end. So all of this, the book banning, I mean, every Christian household has book bans. We know that. If you grew up in a Christian household, you had materials banned. There were things that you were not allowed to read and watch. And I understand age development and, you know, conversations around it. I handled it differently as a parent because I understood the damage of banning information and how that just drives them to go find the thing that you didn't want them to find anyway. So it's pointless. But high control regimes will always go after it. And I think we have to fight it. It saved my life. Like if you know that story from the trapdoor vein of the book and how it really was a literal trapdoor for me. My next book that comes out next May is very book centric. Because
oh my God, you're writing another book?
I did already write it.
Oh my God,
it's coming out Cinco de Mayo 26.
Oh, I know how I'm celebrating. I can't wait. Oh my God, it's great.
Yeah,
it's the best news I've gotten in weeks.
That's sweet. It is written as a self-help book. It's a survivor's guide to recovery and hope after religious trauma. And it has some of my stories in it because I use them as anecdotes, but it also has a lot of church history and American history in it and a lot of healing modalities. Everything I did to put myself back together as a person and develop a sense of self is in this book. So education is the thing. It freed me.
It's amazing. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Hang on.
I wish I could tell you what it's called, but they just retitled it and it hasn't been released yet. So I have to
save the title. I need something to look forward to. So it's
I know. Maybe next year when Pretty Furious has grown and the next one comes out, we can do this again. Yeah, we would love that. You talked a little bit about reclaiming your personhood yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did you begin that journey? And maybe just like an overarching synopsis of the next book.
Yes.
How did you get from point A to point B?
Oh gosh. So Alanis Morissette's music is like my soundtrack, and I mention her because I felt like when I first escaped, that I was reconnecting after having been interrupted with who I was becoming at 19. And the reason I thought that is because my self-development had been truncated. That's what indoctrination does. I didn't know that. I didn't have language for that until really the last 18 months. But because I was studying indoctrination at the time. But indoctrination replaces child development in high control religion, and you are formed into what you should believe before you even know who you are. When you meet people who have no religious baggage, which are truly mythical creatures, and I love meeting them, they give me so much hope. They are developed people. They developed as children and became actualized and autonomous, and they understood their rights and their consent and their boundaries. And then they went and did things with their lives. And then sometimes they're curious about religion, but they weren't shaped with it in their cells. It's not going to impact every single decision that they make. So when I got out and I was in so much shock, and I didn't know that shock and aftermath psychological shock can mimic physical shock, and you can be in that stage for a very long time. I didn't know. And so I had to find my way. And everyone kept pointing to the trauma I had been through. And what I knew is that I was a shell. I was not a fully formed person. They saw a 33-year-old young mother. They expected her to conduct herself like an adult. I was a child inside, and I was a beaten child at that. So I didn't have any confidence or sense of self. In 2007, I couldn't even order pizza. I stuttered so badly. I could not have spoken to people. I couldn't be on camera for sure, like nothing like that. So this is a journey. This is a character arc. And I had to put a little bit of it in A Well-Trained Wife. I had some word count, and spatial issues of like, I can't tell the whole story. I can give you kind of like a process. And it's most people's favorite part is the back 25% where I'm putting myself back together. But the next book is a step-by-step journey on the trail of what it was like to actually go through that.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, one thing that really struck me over and over again was the commentary from church leaders and other women about purity regarding your own children. There was something that stuck out to me that I was riding in my car and I went, what? This idea that wearing jeans was going to turn on
my baby,
your 2-year-old son. I mean, just, I couldn't even fathom that concept. And it just speaks to the greater purity culture that exists. How do you think that, I know how it shaped my adolescence and my young adulthood in the ways I felt about myself and the actions that I participated in. But how do you think that shapes women's mental health across the country and their sense of self when we're so indoctrinated with this idea that everything you do is going to result in a man being turned on in some capacity?
Yes, and I love this question, and I also hate this question. My stomach just did a little twist because I'm still unpacking this. I'm 51. I've got a complicated journey with menopause because I had like a 5-year period where I had a medically induced menopause that we undid. So my hormones have been kind of fucked for the past 8 years. And menopause is like a second puberty. And so I have a lot of activation happening with my pubescent years, which were wrapped up in purity culture. And also in the late 80s and 90s when heroin chic skinny was all the rage and Republicans were in power, which anytime patriarchy is in power, you have the skinny white bitch kind of aesthetic is the thing. And in pastors, like you have the skinny white women next to leaders in high control religion. It's like a whole trope. So the ideas that are in my head also shaped through like religious eating disorders and all the things that go with your body are all part of this purity culture and modesty culture. And I didn't think they would be coming up at 51, but I realized fashion standards think women should look like a coat hanger, like that for the clothes to drape properly, you should be bony. That's a childlike body. That's an undeveloped body. And then we get into some of the more insidious parts of purity culture where they know in these homes, like my mentor told me that my baby would be turned on because I was wearing jeans because she was dealing with that kind of problem in her home. And she was putting tights on her infants. The incest is an open secret in quiverful homes, and molestation.
You mean she was dealing with that problem in the reverse, that her husband was...
It's a hypersexualized culture. Like,
yes.
Even if he wasn't actually touching the children, it's part of the conversation we're always having. Put tights on your babies so that nobody can touch them. Don't let boys change diapers because they might touch their sisters. It's so sexually charged all the time but it's towards children. It's sexually charged towards children and protecting children and having conversations that shouldn't even be on the radar. Like, your little baby's running around naked in the yard. You shouldn't be thinking anything sexual about that. You shouldn't have to protect them from anything that would ever look at them that way. But it's panic. If you see a naked baby, you're panicking because you got to protect them. And so they never unpack that, and we carry it with us. And so, to bring it to the current day, what I think is tasteful at 51 is wrapped up in like what's boxy and formless. I don't want to look like a woman. Why don't I want to look like a curvy woman? The only time I've ever been okay looking like a curvy woman is when I was 9 months pregnant, because then you're revered for being pregnant. You're procreating. Other than that, what is tasteful, classy, old money? All of this is like what covers me, and what makes this shapeless form. I don't know. I don't know.
And so much of it, I think I'm just realizing is so tied to patriarchy and Christian fundamentalism, is this idea of also just being smaller.
Yeah.
Like women being
Yes.
smaller and
Yes.
physically smaller.
Taking up
yes,
less space.
but just smaller all around.
Smaller equates to weaker. You can get smaller through hyper dieting and fasting and prayer and all of that, and then you don't have any will to fight back. So they do want you smaller and weaker.
The concept that you made me begin to think about was this idea of, if we're all just here for the same reason, if we're all just here to procreate, if we're all just here to clean houses and please our husbands in some capacity, then why do we have names? Why do we have individual personalities? Why do we have all of these characteristics that make us different? And that was such a standout concept to me listening to your book. It was just, I was like, oh, yeah. We all are individual, and if we weren't meant to be individual, then why are we?
Right? I wanted to be known by God. If I was going to worship God, I wanted to be known by God and have a name and be valued for who I was. And that's what they said I was going to get. They kept calling it a personal relationship with Jesus. I was like, doesn't sound like I matter as a human being.
Yeah. I'm so curious to know. I know a huge part of something Mallory and I talk about relatively frequently is this concept of, like, what do you believe in now, right? Like, what is the higher? Is there a higher fill in the blank? What is the higher fill in the blank? How do you have a relationship with the higher fill in the blank? Like, whatever it is. What does that look like for you now?
So this is one of my questions that I always explain. So I identify as spiritually private, and here's why. There's multiple reasons. I am a people pleaser at heart and always will be for the rest of my life. So I always know that my monkey brain wants to tell whoever's asking the answer they want so they'll like me. So the Christians want to hear that I'm still Christian, and the atheists want to hear that I'll never touch religion again. And I'm like, what do they want to hear? So I can't tell you. That's that part of it. But also, spirituality is so deeply personal that we are supposed to own that first. What we think about the world and the creator and our chosen belief system should be a decision that we make for ourselves. And that's a process of exploration that comes through child development that was denied me as a 4-year-old. I was told to make a major life decision for my eternity by rote belief at 4 years old, and that was going to save me from the fires of hell. So part of my inner child work is saying, hey, little 4-year-old, you do not have to decide that, and it is actually really inappropriate to ask you to decide that at 4 years old. So I also give a lot of room for fluidity and for changing my mind. That helps me avoid fundamentalism and being in a box and assigning myself labels. And those labels are changing meaning in America, so I would be careful with them anyway. I always invite people, go ahead and judge my character. Go ahead and get to know me, suss me out. I welcome you to judge me. You should know from my interactions if I'm somebody you want to listen to or not. And don't listen to me too closely, because you should never have a guru or somebody that you revere so much that, you can't question them.
Yeah, that you're no longer thinking for yourself.
Right.
I love that answer.
Mm-hmm.
I
it's
think
long,
spiritually
but it's also
private. Yeah,
It's not.
It's great.
It makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, I am a huge LGBTQI advocate. I'm on the board of our local Pride organization. I care deeply about my friends and my family members who are a part of that community. And the pushback we hear so often with that community is that that's not something that kids can understand, or you're pushing your ideology or your lifestyle or whatever people want to say on kids. And I've had this even in my relationship with my bonus children, that they can't understand that, they're not capable of understanding. And yet in that same breath, they're somehow capable of understanding the concepts of heaven and hell, and they're somehow capable of understanding all of the things that come along with the Bible. So those choices are for individuals for sure, but I do find that to be an extremely hypocritical thought process.
It's an important point because it's a case where the accusation is actually a projection. Yeah, exactly. The evidence shows that indoctrination happens in religious circles, not in gay circles.
Yeah. Well, so Maggie and I both have experienced sexual trauma, both child sexual abuse and adulthood sexual trauma and sexual assault. And we have often talked a lot about how that shapes who we are today in our womanhood and our marriages and how we interact with our physical being. And so a lot of what we were reading, or what I was reading in your book, was hitting home because there are so many instances where you did not have autonomy over your body and you didn't feel like you had the ability to set boundaries for yourself. How has that changed for you, or has it, in the last, couple of years as you've unpacked all of this and been able to move forward? And what does that feel like for you now?
I, again, am going to point to the wonderful time period we live in, because language like consent did not exist when I was coming up. And even when I got out, it was just being developed. So today's young women, that they can understand enthusiastic consent is wonderful. I'm so excited for them. And I also am the lucky beneficiary that gets to learn it for the first time. So, learning about boundaries. I can set my own boundaries. I can hold them, that they should not be rigid rules. They can be fluid. I can change my mind. Consent matters. What happens to my person and my body is my business. All of that is evidence of the healing journey that I've been on. I really went from like super conservative, anti-abortion, locked down, I have no rights to my body mindset to, no, actually, this is my body and I get to decide what comes in and I get to decide what is removed from it. And that's my business and this is my power. And I will also protect that autonomy for other women, which is a big thing that's missing in Christian fundamentalism. We spend so much time talking about, are we empowering tradwives? Are we allowing them to have their choices? And they are choosing what they want for themselves without any consideration for how their choices impact other women, because it's just not even talked about. It's their ideal is the focus, and that's what makes it a fundamentalism in itself, because it's the ideological purity that is the pursuit, not, well, how is this for other women? How is this for women who have to work or want to work or don't want children or can't have children, or, those conversations don't happen. So I think any conversation about consent has to widen it. It's not just about the sole individual. It's about the wider society. And that right there is a massive difference between the two camps that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's such a wonderful, wonderful point. You have had this deconstruction journey in your life, and you are obviously, a completely different person than you were when you were 30. Mm-hmm. I don't want to ever give, someone a label. Mallory and I identify as feminists for sure. And I'm curious how you think feminist women can support women who might be in these, toxic, high control religious environments. Like, if we see someone who might be engaging with that, or see someone who maybe is even on like the fence. I feel like there's a lot of people who I know kind of like in outer circles who are like definitely on a little bit of a fence of like a tradwife situation. And I'm sort of like, what's happening there? What would you say to people like us and what we could do to help those women?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing is be visible, be different and be visible and be vocal. And it can be as simple as you're scrolling on your phone and you see a tradwife reel and you go into the comments and you point them in the direction of a true story or a documentary, or something that all the onlookers will see. I'm always aware that when I'm commenting on social media, it's not just for the person I'm replying to or the content creator, it's for all the onlookers. We do go into the comments to read them. And sometimes I just block everybody that's going to argue with me. I'm not going to get involved in, the vitriol, but I am going to make sure I'm visible with a counter view. It is that counter view and the visibility of that counter view and the willingness of other women who'd lived other footprints that helped save me. So I feel very acutely that responsibility of like, we cannot just be different and invisible and let it like, well, they're going to decide for themselves. No, they're having too much societal impact. So there's also a lot of silent onlookers that are paying attention more than we realize. And so that's a free and easy and accessible way anybody can make a difference. You do not have to have a large platform to present a contrasting point of view on content. You can buy books, you can support things, you can post, you can be a voice. Sure, that's all available to people. But you can call senators, like there's political activism that you can do without anybody seeing it. But I really think the more visible and vocal we can be and happy, like it is resistance right now to be joyful, happy, connected, accepting, affirming, participating, like not giving into despair. All of that is active resistance. We should do it with our whole hearts.
Yeah, and courage is contagious.
Yes.
Demonstrating that courage just really encourages other women to do the same.
Yeah, I love that, especially existing in like the online echo chamber world that we live in. I can't remember who it was, Mallory, who we interviewed somebody one time who said like, all you really need is one person within kind of your echo chamber to make you think maybe just a little bit differently about something. Mm-hmm. And I always think to myself when I'm screaming into the void and into the abyss, I'm sort of like, what if I happen to be the one person who they've been, kind of drug into this like alt-right Christian nationalism weird experience. Like, what if I happen to be the only person that they follow or they see who is speaking about the other side of it, So I love that you mentioned that.
It's a flip
lovely.
of evangelism, right? Like it's using their own tactics against them. And it's like they had this saying, sometimes you'll be the only Jesus they'll ever see. Be the only liberated woman they'll ever see. It can be as simple as saying, I just don't agree with that. Or I know an exception to that. Just plant that seed and let it take root. It shows them respect because they, we want to respect their autonomy and humanity as well. But it gets the job done. It cracks the facade that they are unilaterally, the thing. We don't even know. This is the thing I have to remind myself every day. We don't even really know the numbers of who actually voted for this, who actually wants this. Online communities skew that perception. So, I just don't believe the bulk of our country is there. And I won't give in to the idea that the bulk of our country is there.
No.
Yeah.
And even if we're looking at the skewed numbers, it's still nowhere near the majority. So
exactly.
I like to remind people of that. They can say this is mandated, this is what we voted for, and I'm like, no, this is a small portion of the people who live in this
minority
country.
Rule.
Yeah. So don't kid yourself.
Yep.
And I just, lastly, you kind of brought this up of our products that we like to talk about because you can talk about all this serious stuff and beauty products while you're at it. But I'd love to hear sort of the deconstruction around that and then tell us what product makes you feel pretty.
Yeah. So this is all a learning curve to me. So when you grow up in high control religion, your development and all of the normal experimentation that helps you find out what your sense of style is and what you like and don't like, all of that is truncated or overridden by somebody else's desire for you. So I'm always exploring this. And I'm also have given into some tropes I think that might not be true. Like I would have said I was a tomboy just because it's easier not to confront femininity when you're not sure what is safe. And when you come out of it, you're changing stages so much. What is okay? I got involved in a pretty benevolent patriarchal marriage for my second marriage. And, he wanted a little Russian Orthodox head-covered woman. And I've got this flaming red hair and a big personality, and that wasn't really me. And I had to work through that. And then when I worked through it, he didn't like the real vibrant me. So, I am very much still probably going through what 14 and 15-year-old girls go through naturally. I'm going through this in this new puberty. So all that said, when I saw the thing that said, and bring your favorite beauty product, I was like, oh, fuck. I'm watching TikTok reels to learn how to do basics of makeup because I have told myself I just don't like it, but I actually do. And there's so many options. I really love the whole skincare and the makeup thing. That's very exciting to me. So on that vein, here's my thing. Dermatologies, SPF, tinted moisturizer.
Yes.
I have to have SPF because I'm pale, and so I usually use sunblock every day. All the
Everyone
time.
has to have SPF.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Everyone.
But this is, I'm like, they combined it, and it has, I think it has hyaluronic in it. Yeah. So like,
Nice.
and it's good for humidity. So I feel like, okay, I have a good basic.
Love it.
We do
Mallory,
love it.
don't you use that? The dermatology brand?
I don't use that one. I have a Skin Better Science.
Oh, yeah,
scent
Skin Better.
one.
Yeah.
But you know what I learned? I just came back from the beach. What I've learned is Maggie and I talk a lot. In case you ever get a fungal acne infection on your face,
Oh,
Tia,
ouch.
that we've learned that Head and Shoulders will take care of that for you.
Whoa.
Just
Maggie,
the OG. Yeah.
I just came back from the beach and it happened to me again at the beach. And so what I'm actually learning is that sunscreen is not my friend.
Oh.
So
It's probably the type of sunscreen you're using.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot that are not fungal acne friendly.
Mineral sunscreens are not for me. So it turns out I have a lot of those.
Yeah.
Maybe I should just put those in a giveaway for everyone.
We're really trying to get Head and Shoulders to just sponsor our
That'd
podcast.
be
We have
great.
talked about Head and
Or
Shoulders.
Neutrogena, because Neutrogena is like really great for super sensitive skin, which I have, and that's
Yeah. We
Go,
just
Mallory.
we have, this is podcast number 4 where we've talked about shoulders.
Literally, they're going to be like,
off-label
"Please stop."
uses for
Yeah.
dandruff
Yeah,
shampoo.
they're like, God.
So
They're
good.
like, please stop promoting putting it on your face. Please, God, be done.
Well, Tia, we want to thank you so much for your
Yes.
time and
you.
your authenticity and sharing with us. And we know that there will be women who are listening from our circles who are inspired to, first of all, pick up your book, but second of all, by your story. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yes,
so
thank you
much.
for being here.